We're in Matthew 24. Go there. We're looking at the last teaching that Jesus gives in open public. And then there's several other teachings he gives to John at the Last Supper. Actually 3 or 4 chapters of it about service and love. And that's where we find the foot washing and all that. So who'd like to open this one? Thank you, Bonnie.
You can't say no.
But I am here.
You can't say no to prayer.
They are out, just.
I'll hold your hand.
No,
Go ahead. If you don't want your hand,
okay, great.
nobody can pray.
Anytime before 9:30.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful morning. We thank you for gathering us all here together. We thank you for your continued presence. God, we ask that you open our hearts and our minds to what you have for us to receive this morning. We ask that we take it and use it to your glory. And we ask that you be with everyone tomorrow as they're off to school, off of work, being with family. And we ask that you bring us all safely back here next week. Amen.
Okay, last week we were looking at some warnings that Jesus gave us, and one of them was that nation would rise against nation. In 2018, there were 319 armed conflicts in the world, amounting to 147,000 people, dead bodies and change. That's up 300% from 20 years ago. It said love will grow cold. And I think probably the best way to gauge the love of a nation is to look how it treats its children, how it provides for its children, how it takes care of its children. Okay. Since Roe v. Wade, we have aborted 65 million children. Child abuse last year was 4.1 million cases of child abuse that was reported. 1.7 million children were involved in those 4.1 million cases. 1,572 of them died as a process. That amounts to just over 5 a day. That's child abuse. And that's the children below the age of 7. The statistics beyond that are staggering. When they get to be 7 years older, well, they can run away from home and go live with grandma. They can go hide out somewhere. But that's just the bracket 6 and below.
I know that my Kaylee upstairs, she has been abused sexually and mentally and physically, and she's 12, and she just got away from her parents maybe a year and a half ago, and now I can see all the damage that it's done to her. So I mean, she has 1 out of 6 kids, so, and that's here, you know.
I used to be kind of high on the Boy Scouts because they took a stand against allowing homosexual men to camp out with young boys in the woods. Generally wouldn't think that was a very good idea. But then last year they dropped the ball on that. They decided that they would allow homosexual men to be scout leaders. And last week it was revealed on national news that there are hundreds of lawsuits charging the Boy Scouts with abuse going back 40 years. And it was all covered up, and now, you know, you're innocent until proven guilty, and there's a lot of fake news out there, and I don't know how that's going to turn out. But it just seemed like as soon as they dropped the ball, everything started coming out of the closet. And I hope it doesn't end up where it probably will, but in this day and age, final days of human history, that's the way it is. It said there will be a lot of earthquakes. So far this year, there's been 1,642 Category 7 earthquakes in the world. In 1950, there was 19 the whole year. So the earthquakes are rising exponentially. It's like the earth is screaming, Jesus is coming back, and in its own way, it's proclaiming his return. So just those three categories, and it was interesting. On the child abuse thing, I was teaching Matthew back around 1990 in a church called French Land. And I was able to go in and find all kinds of statistics about bar charts, all kinds of charts about child abuse from 1900 all the way up to 1990. And for 3 days, I tried to find statistics on it with a better computer and a better internet, and I couldn't find hardly anything on it. There are child abuse sites government-wide and church-wide and whatever, but there aren't any numbers that you can find. They're just, I could find out what happened last week, or last year, and I knew what the numbers were back in 1990 when I did it, but all those numbers have been buried. Like it's a big conspiracy, like the government doesn't want to admit that they took Christ out of everything, and now the whole world's falling apart, and they don't have an explanation for it, and they don't want to hear what my explanation is, so they just buried it. It's
The
all
FBI
gone.
will be knocking on your door. You've been flagged now.
I really don't care. I don't. So, Jesus said in the final days, this is what will happen. And how does it look? What do you think? Where do you think we are in respect to the final days?
We're there.
We're in them.
Getting close.
How much worse could it get? And we're just talking about America here. We're not talking about Russia and places where there's very little law concerning these things. We're just talking about America. Maybe the best there is in some places. All right. And we talked about the false prophets already. And all these are the beginning of birth pangs. Now, when he says birth pangs, he's talking about labor pangs. What's about to be born? The new heaven and the new earth. Okay, did we read 9 through 15? And you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death. You will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached to the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Okay, we did read that, but we only got about halfway through it. We talked about the love of most growing cold, and the children is just a simple sign of that. It's just a simple aspect of it. What about sex trafficking? What about all the people that are hauled up here from Mexico and Guatemala thinking they're going to get good jobs and whatever and end up in the brothels? What about the slave labor? All that is over and above what we talked about with the children. It seems like when we started abortion, the value of human life became zero. That was a consequence of it. Okay? When we took Christ out of everything, the value of human life just cascaded downhill. And right now, it's that proverbial snowball that's getting ready to crash at the bottom of the mountain. Okay, Houston. The gospel of the kingdom will be preached to the whole world. When do you suppose that's going to happen?
Is it when Israel gets its second chance?
Pardon me?
Is it when Israel gets its second chance?
That will be when, that will be, we're talking about the birth pangs now. Yeah, Israel gets a second chance during the tribulation,
Okay,
but this is during the birth pangs.
before that.
So none of this can happen until all this is fulfilled. So when do you think it will be that the gospel will be preached to all nations?
Well, every year when the Gideon comes, he says they've reached more than ever. I mean,
That's true. They're getting in more and more nations, and they got more and more Bibles. It's already happened.
So I was gonna say that, for sure.
The satellite, when we got satellite radio and when we got satellite television, the whole earth is being bathed and saturated with the gospel. I mean, those satellites are stationed all around the earth, and that signal is 24 hours a day, all day long. That has been fulfilled, as well as the other things we talked about. That's done. Anybody can take their cell phone anywhere and get a signal from a satellite if you have the right app. I mean, used to, you had your dish satellite had to be focused on a certain spot. Well, now they've got these things on the top of the cars, and you can watch dish driving down the highway. Not the driver. Just the kids in the back seat, okay? But if you have the right equipment, that signal is just, we're being cascaded day in and day out with all kinds of signals from outer space, from the satellites orbiting the Earth. It's all there now. It's been happening for years and years and years. That prophecy has been fulfilled for decades, and it's getting more complex every day. You can turn on if you've got the right equipment, you can turn on your TV at any primitive campsite and watch any TV show you want if you're subscribing to Dish or DirecTV or any of those. The equipment now will pick them up anywhere, and without aiming at one. When we first got it, it had to be very precise and aimed at one specific point. And if it was just off 2 degrees, then your signal dropped by half. Not anymore. That signal's just cascading down on the earth, and the new equipment can pick it up and it goes. So that's done. The gospel is being preached to the whole world every minute of every day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It's all being done as we speak. And will be preached to the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Okay. Basically, everything is already been fulfilled that needs to let this happen. It's all there in place right now. All right. So somebody read 15 through 25.
When you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Messiah," or "There he is," do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you ahead of time.
Okay. Now we have left the birth pangs and we're in the tribulation, the 7 years of tribulation. All right? It said, when you're standing in the holy place and the abomination that causes desolation spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. And then those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Okay. It's going to happen. It's going to be an event that's going to happen to the total surprise of everybody involved. It's just going to occur. What is the abomination of desolation? Let me tell you. Hey, the first 3.5 years, if you remember, the first 3.5 years is called the seals. The seals are open. And a third of the trees die, and a third of the grass dies, which means oats and barley, and wheat, and all that. So the food supplies are going to die. Right? The trees are going to die. There's going to be a lot of earthquakes and whatever, and the moon is going to turn to blood, probably through pollution or maybe volcanoes erupting. If you remember when Mount St. Helens erupted, for 1.5 years, there was the most tremendously beautiful sunsets and sunrises because of the volcanic dust that was in the air, and it came through as orange and yellow and red, and they were just magnificent. I mean, people would stop along the highways and watch the sun come on. I was driving a lot back then, working for the post office and setting up computers and things. I'd be driving along, and the sun would be coming up, and the sky would just turn into this big, beautiful palette, and people would pull over and stop and just watch the sun come. So all those things are going to be happening, but they're going to happen subtly. They're going to kind of creep in, and people who don't study the Bible and don't study Revelation are not going to see the consequence of those. They're not going to realize it.
Has that seal kind of already been opened, considering the fact that we're having so many earthquakes and we're having all that, a lot of that stuff you said, everything except for the moon being red, everything else has already happened.
Yes. It's yes.
We have blood moons
Exactly
all
right.
the time though. Well, those are happening too.
Yeah.
So that seal has already been opened.
It can begin any day because the foundation has been laid. We could even be in it right now because the first 3.5 years are very subtle. The Antichrist is probably alive today because it said that the generation that sees Israel return home will also see the second coming of Jesus Christ. Well, they came home in 1946, and I was born in 1946. A generation is somewhere between 72 and 75 now. That's the life expectancy of a man. Women is up to like 81, 82, because of better health care and all that. So a generation now is somewhere between 72 and 82. Okay. I honestly believe if I live to be 82 years old, I will be looking at Jesus Christ standing on the cloud.
My dad's pretty adamant about that. He said it's going to be in his generation,
Yep.
which is 77 right now.
And that's what the Bible says. It says the generation that sees Israel return to Israel is going to see the second coming of Jesus Christ. And if that's my generation, you guys are for sure going to see it. All right? But it's all gonna, it's all being fulfilled around us. People don't study the Bible, so they don't see it clearly, and so it kind of creeps up. Well, for 3.5 years, this man is a great man of peace. He engineers a peace treaty with Israel and the Palestinians, and he brings peace to the Middle East. Now, the abomination, they rebuilt the Second Temple, and they have already had stones milled in Bedford, Indiana, and shipped to Israel, and they're in storage in Israel to start the construction of the temple. In southern Ohio, they have already engineered the first red heifers that will be sacrificed in the temple in the initial opening of the temple, the dedication of the temple. There's a special red heifer talked about in the Old Testament, and they have under the control of some Jewish priests. There's a farm in southern Ohio that has a whole herd of red heifers that have been purified genetically back to, I don't know how in the world they know that it's back to the original red heifer, but they claim that it is. And those red heifers are waiting to be sacrificed for the dedication of the temple. Everything is being put in place. Now, it was interesting, they said that none of the stones could be milled at the temple site. There could not be the sound of a hammer, there could not be, the temple site had to be a peaceful place. They had to mill those stones and haul them in. That's in the Old Testament, in 1 Kings and in 1 Chronicles. They had to mill them and then haul them in and set them in place in order, but they could not pound on them, they could not beat on them, they could not size them. They had to be milled somewhere else. And there were some of them were milled in Bedford, Indiana, and shipped to Israel on ships. Okay. So, all that's in place. Now the abomination of desolation is when this Antichrist, at the 3.5-year mark, stands up and says, I am the Jesus who has returned. I'm going to put a mark on your forehead, 666. You're not going to be able to buy or sell until that. And he goes into the temple where the Holy of Holies will be, shouldn't be. I mean, the curtain was rent and ripped apart, and there's no use of the Holy of Holies anymore. But the Jewish people don't acknowledge Jesus Christ as the final sacrifice, so there will be a Holy of Holies in the temple. And he will go in, and he will open the curtains, and he will go in claiming to be the Messiah returned, and he will put a sacrifice on the altar. And that is what is meant in Daniel by the abomination of desolation. He desolates the inner sanctum of the Holy of Holies. And he will be a Gentile from the tribe of Dan. Okay. The tribe of Dan was cast out of Israel. At this point in time, they have no reason to be in the Holy of Holies. They're not even Israelites as far as Israel is concerned. But God is going to engineer it so that this Israelite from the tribe of Dan, from the ancient tribe of Dan, will rise up, become the Antichrist, and will go into the Holy of Holies and present a sacrifice at the 3.5-year mark. If you're not ready at this point in time, the next 3.5 years is going to be a living hell on earth for you. Look at what it says. It says immediately, don't pack a bag or anything, get out of town. Now it's probably talking about, what's that ancient city where Rome besieged it, and, rather than surrender and the people fell off the cliff. What's the name of that?
Masada.
Yeah, Masada. It's probably talking about them fleeing into the desert to the ancient towers of Masada. You know, the Roman army had a problem with it. Of course, the helicopter's not going to have any problem with it. But God says that he's going to protect them on that trip. And if you go into the prophecies in Ezekiel, it says that an eagle will pick them up and take them there. Who do you suppose the eagle is?
Plane. A plane.
A what?
The United States plane.
United States. Yeah. It says a bear will come down from the north from Meshach and Shadrach and Abednego and attack them in the end. Who do you suppose the bear is? Russia. Where is Meshach? Gog and Magog. Okay. Where do you think Gog of Magog is? The ancient city of Gog of the province of Magog. Take a shot.
Moscow.
Moscow. Yep. In the exact same location. So the bear from the north, the eagle will fly them to rescue them. Remember when they put the wall up and separated Berlin in the middle? Do you remember who came along and supplied East Berlin? Or was it West Berlin? West Berlin, when they built the wall and separated them off. You remember who did that?
Us?
What?
We did.
We did. We did. We evacuated, we brought in supplies, we flew in, we flew out. We took care of the situation, and my best guess is we're gonna be doing it again. I think if the bear can be Russia, the eagle can be America. Because it's figurative. Either it's gonna have something to do with an eagle, or it's totally figurative. Because eagles, this is not a Tolkien's.
That's what I just said, maybe it'll be Gandalf.
And the eagles come and rescue them from the orcs and take them to a mountain someplace. Although, that's exactly what he was referring to when he wrote that book. He talked about the eagle coming and rescuing the 13 and taking them to a mountain. He was talking about this exact situation. There's a book out, the biblical implications of the War of the Rings. It is amazing to read that book. Now, he wasn't a theology professor, but I think God used him mightily when he wrote that book because there's a lot of things happen in that book, and if you know the Bible, when you read the War of the Rings, it's like, oh, I'll bet that is, oh, that's in the Bible. Gandalf grabs hold of the, it's too early in the morning for this, and falls down into the pit and is down there for 3 days and then comes back out, and Gandalf the White, or Gray, becomes Gandalf the White. And he got the brilliant raiment, and he was resurrected after 3 days. Do you think all this is by accident? Tolkien was a masterful writer, and he wasn't trying to create a Bible, but there was a lot of truth in what he said, and a lot of implications to the things that he planned. Well,
Just because I don't know anything about anything, there's no temple right now?
no,
It's just not there.
no, there's a big Muslim mosque.
Okay, I was gonna say, I've seen something, but I didn't know what it
One wall
was.
left.
Huh?
There's one wall left.
One wall?
One wall, yeah. Yeah, there's a Wailing Wall.
How long is it supposed to
It's a Wailing
take?
Wall, right?
How long is it supposed to take to build the temple?
This is going to be the most amazing construction feat the world has ever seen. I mean, they have been amassing the supplies for years. They had the cedar. They've been amassing gold. They had the red heifers.
So you think it'll go up quick?
I think it'll probably take 3.5 years from beginning to end. And he will probably do this at the dedication ceremony.
The Muslims say it's where Muhammad ascended.
What, Mason?
The Muslims, the reason that it's holy to Muslims is they say that that's where Muhammad ascended into heaven. And the rock that's in the dome of the rock has supposedly got a footprint in it for his ascension. That's why they.
It's real interesting research to read about all that. But once this guy engineers his peace treaty, and however he does it, they're going to get that area back, and that temple's going on, and it's going up. They'll probably work on it 365 days a year, except for the Sabbath, and they will probably work on it 24 hours a day.
You know who, I saw this the other day. Do you know who ISIS says that they're going to be, that they believe in an apocalypse too? Do you know who ISIS says is going to lead their armies?
Who?
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ.
Really?
Yep.
That fits right in with the whole scheme of the Antichrist.
Yeah.
A man claiming to be Christ. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
There's several things on the internet, if you look it up, different people that say they're Jesus, and, I mean, they got followers and everything. I mean,
Yeah, 319 of them documented at the moment from pulpits that claim to be Jesus. And nobody gets up and walks out.
Yeah.
Why does it like
That's
to
the
start?
terrible
That's the scary part.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
If Rob gets
call
up,
them out on it?
if Rob gets up this morning and claims to be Jesus, don't be in the doorway as I leave, because I'm gonna be leaving fast. And you're all invited to follow me out, but don't slow me down. I'm getting out of here. No, Rob's not gonna do that. But 319 documented men have done it in the last 5 years.
I saw one picture of a guy that he was dressed in a white robe, long hair, beard. He had people kneeling at his feet all around him.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's all over the Bible. I mean, you can't miss it if you just open it up and read it. It's all over the place. And if we don't get upstairs, you're gonna discipline us. Bad children.
How's the thing is,
I know. Bob said, we need to build a fence. Right, church? Bob already talked.
I watched the whole documentary about it the other day.
My babies are upstairs.
He got quite a few people to believe it.
Yeah.
I
I
think
went to
they're
check
all
on Mom last night.
building organizations.
Huh? I went to check on Mom last night. Uh-huh. Because I had kids living at home. I texted her several times and she kept saying, I'm fine, I'm doing really good. Oh, why?
You already told
Over
me.
at like
You already
8:30.
told me that.
Makes it easy.
Yeah.